We are back. We are back. We are back. I feel like there's something else going on too. Oh, yeah. The 49ers reported 2 OTAs today, and the draft is 3 days away. What is up, everybody? Welcome to the show. So, we over here at the show, formerly known as the BS Report, have gone through a little bit of a branding change. We will now be known as Off Schedule. Spent the last few weeks going through a little bit of research and doing some reorganizing, I guess, of my thoughts on this channel and how things have gone, and decided, with the advice of some people that I sought out, to go ahead and make some changes now during the slow part of the off season and hit things rolling on draft week. And we're here. I am super excited about this week coming up. The draft is in 3 days. OTA started today. Now they are voluntary, so people showed, people did it. It's not really that big of a deal. The one person who did show up that it is a big deal is Brock. So I would say that the biggest thing, though, is it's draft week, and I'm very excited. The offseason has been super dull for the most part. The Niners haven't done much. In fact, the few moves that they have made have been kind of head scratching to me. But I'm looking forward to see how John and Kyle and Jed and the scouting department takes this team going forward. I'm excited to see the new prospects coming into this team and to see how this team is going to look for the rest of the offseason program and into training camp and preseason. And I always maintain hope for a successful season coming up. This year, that hope, as of today, now remember, this is 3 days before the draft, but as of today, my hope for this coming season is not very high. But I am a fan, and it is early, and you know what? Everybody is 0-0 right now, so anything can happen. And I truly believe that with the right draft and the right chemistry on this team and the right drive and motivation, that all you got to do is get to the playoffs, because once you get there, anything can happen. And that road and that journey starts now. It starts today. And I am very, very excited that, number one, Brock showed up to OTAs. Because even though I am an advocate for not paying him top of the market money, not even top 10, not anything that starts with a 5, I do believe that for this coming season, anyways, he gives this team the best chance to win. And I do believe that for us to have the opportunity to get to the playoffs, for us to have the opportunity to have a successful season, then Brock needs to be there for the entire program. Brock needs to be 100% bought in. The whole team needs to be bought in around him. And he needs to show that business is business and football is football, and that he's going to lead this team the right way. And I think that's important for a quarterback, especially for a quarterback. And so I am super proud of Brock for being the leader that I knew he was, and stepping up and making that decision to show up, to lead by example, to let his agent handle the business and he handles his business. And showing up is exactly that. That's Brock handling his business. And I think that that's great. And I'm proud that he did that. I don't think it's a big deal that George didn't show up this early. Now, if this continues and this drags in all the way till the beginning of training camp, that scares me, just because he is an aging player, and we've kind of seen how it's gone the last few times when we've had players hold out and how that following season was for those guys. And I don't think that George has a season left to lose. I think he needs the seasons that he has left. And so I hope that this gets resolved sooner rather than later. But as of right now, I am not worried about George missing this first installment of the offseason program at all. Now, another thing that was reported at John's press conference today was that Trent Williams is there. And so I think that that should pretty much lay to rest the whole idea of Trent retiring, which is something that I honestly was leaning towards. I really honestly thought that Trent was probably going to retire. Um, if for no other reason, all the things that he went through in his personal life last year, and I'm not going to comment too much on that because that's his personal life and that's private, and I respect that. And I will say that I thought that there was a high possibility that he, you know, with all the money he's already made and all the successes that he's already had, I thought that there was a high possibility that he might step away and kind of focus on that aspect of his life now, focus on, growing his family and being there for that. And, you know, stranger things have happened. I guess that could still be the case. It seems though that he reported today. So it appears to me that that's not going to be the case, at least not yet. That he has not necessarily made the decision to retire yet. And so I look forward to having him back for at least one more season. Um, I am I'm very happy though that Brock showed. And that's kind of where I want my focus to be today, because with everything that's going on, it would be very easy for somebody so young as Brock is to be kind of tunnel visioned on one goal, especially when you go from making such a small amount of money as he did um, for the first 3 years of his career to now kind of having the opportunity to get generational money, to have money that's going to change his life and his kids' life and their kids' life probably. And the fact that, he's able to, separate all these different things is very impressive to me. And that just goes to show the one part of Brock that is elite. The part of him that is exceptional is his ability to lead, his ability to do the right thing, and to show the young players around him. And, to be completely honest with you, not just the young players, even the veterans on this team, the right way to do it. And, especially because at the end of the day, and I know this is a big debate and we don't have to fully get in. I'm not going to fully get into it here, but the fact of the matter is he is under contract, and so it's not that he's a free agent and that, he has another year left on his contract, you know, and I know that there's the whole debate where people say, well, when you underplay your contract, owners want to cut you and get rid of you. And so when you overplay your contract, it should be fair for players to demand more money. And I agree that that's neither here nor there. Both things are right. This is sports. It's a business. It's ran a certain way. It's always been ran a certain way. When a player outplays his contract, he should be able to ask for more money, within reason. Also, at the same time, when a player underperforms his contract and you have an out in the contract, you should be able to get out from the contract with no hard feelings. It is a business. But at the same time, players should have the understanding that these guys, and I guess I can't necessarily speak for Jed because I don't know that Jed actually made his billions. Okay. But a lot of these billionaire owners of these teams didn't become billionaires by making dumb decisions. And so they generally make good decisions in business, and that's why they're as successful as they are. And as much as us as fans look at this just from the perspective of a fan, we have to understand that these guys are also talking about their livelihood. A lot of these guys have spent their entire lives building themselves up to have the type of money that they have and to make dumb decisions. Because here's the thing. Let's say the owners of the 49ers decided, Jed York decided, you know what, I'm going to give Brock $65 million a year because we want to keep Brock here. The fans love Brock. You know, he's a good guy. He's a great leader. He's got great character. We want to keep him here. So we're going to give him 60. We're going to give him 65 million a year. And then the team around him is depleted and he flames out. And the Niners are in salary cap hell for the next 4 to 5 years, and they're not winning any games. All the same fans and all the same people that were yelling and screaming and hollering that we need to pay this guy are going to be going at his head. They're going to be going at Jed saying, you screwed this up. You decided to pay him. You decided to give him all that money. Now we had to get rid of Debo. We had to get rid of Greenlaw. We couldn't sign, Kittle. We couldn't be active in free agency, all because you had to pay this guy. And now we have nothing. We don't have the quarterback who's not any good, or we have a quarterback that's not any good. And we also don't have the talent. So I think as a fan, sometimes it's a kind of a fine line that you got to walk there between being a fan and also understanding that it is a business. And, I've heard so many content creators and I've heard so many 49ers pundits and fans and even national people saying, well, Tua got 50 plus. And I've heard them saying that Trevor Lawrence got 50 plus and Jordan Love got 50 plus. Well, here's the thing, and I think I've said this before on one of my videos, but when I was a kid, my mom and my grandma would always tell me when I would say, well, so-and-so did it, my friend did it. They would say, well, if your friend went and jumped off a bridge, would you follow them off too? Would you jump as well? So the point I'm trying to make is just because the Dolphins made the mistake of paying Tua what they paid him, and the Jags made the mistake of paying Trevor Lawrence what they paid, and Dallas made the astronomical mistake of paying Dak Prescott $60 million, doesn't mean that the 49ers have to also make the same mistake. Just because something is like, and I'm not trying to say anything about negative about Larry Krueger. I mean, I love watching his show. I think he makes great content. And for the most part, I really, really agree with a lot of what he says. But the one thing that drives me absolutely nuts is when people say that's the market, that's the rate. Okay, fine, whatever. Just because something is the market rate doesn't mean you have to pay it. I mean, you don't have to do it. Look at 2 years ago even, when a new car that just 2 years prior to that was $20,000 was $40,000. Well, just because that's what the market was for the car doesn't mean you had to go buy the car. The interest rates on mortgages and stuff, just when they were at their peak, just because that's what the market dictated doesn't mean that you had to go buy it at that time. So, and I know that's a little bit of comparing apples to oranges and stuff, but it's not, because at the end of the day, this is the way I view it. Either, for one, if you have to have the discussion about whether or not you should pay the quarterback and if he's worth paying him 50, 55, $60 million, if you have to talk about it, then he's not. It's that simple. Because you know what? And there's not a lot of those guys out there in the NFL. There's not. And to me, if you don't have one of those guys, you don't pay him that. There's maybe 4 in my opinion. Now, I've heard guys like Jesse say that there's maybe at any given time 7 true franchise quarterbacks in the NFL. Um, maybe off the top. Okay, do you think that there was any debate on whether or not to pay Patrick Mahomes? And from my understanding, he's not even making 50. But if he was, would there be any debate in paying Patrick Mahomes whatever amount of money he asked for? I think that if news came out right now that Patrick Mahomes just renegotiated his contract with the Kansas City Chiefs, and he has a new deal with an AAV of $65 million a year, nobody would even blink an eye. Nobody would be like, the Chiefs are done. The Chiefs are going to be in salary cap hell. They're never going to win again. What did they do? They're stupid, blah, blah, blah. Nobody would say it. It wouldn't happen. Now, same thing with Josh Allen. Josh Allen just signed his new deal. Okay. There was no discussion whether he should get it or deserved it. The same thing could be said for Lamar Jackson or Joe Burrow. Jaden Daniels, when he comes up for his deal, if his career keeps going on the trajectory that it's on now, will more than likely also be in that conversation. Okay. But then you start to get to guys where the questions start to arise. You start to kind of pause a little bit. You kind of start to think, well, you get guys like Justin Herbert, whom I love. I would love to have Justin Herbert on the 49ers. I would sign off on a trade of Brock Purdy for Justin Herbert before the opposing general manager even finished the sentence and asking me if I would be interested. You know, that's how highly I think of him. But at the same time, he's not a slam dunk $55 to $60 million a year quarterback. He's not. The same thing for CJ Stroud, who I also think very highly of. Think he's a great quarterback. You know, there's those guys that are kind of in that middle, almost elite, almost, but not quite there yet. Not quite. Now, I want to see what Herbert can do this year in his second year under Harbaugh. If Herbert doesn't prove this year that he belongs in that group with the other guys, he's not going to. Then he's not worth it. He's just not. CJ Stroud is probably, in my opinion, a year or two away from that, from me saying absolutely not. Jordan Love, this year, I view Jordan Love the same way I view Herbert. He's got to show it this year. He's got to show that he belongs in the conversation with Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson or Patrick Mahomes, or else he's not going to be that guy. And you can't pay those guys. Dak Prescott, good Lord, man. What was Jerry Jones thinking? Dak Prescott is a $40 million a year quarterback. Maybe. And here's the other thing. Why would you ever pay a quarterback $40 to $45 million a year? I don't understand it. To me, the way I view it is either you're paying a quarterback 50 to 60 million, and I just described my criteria for paying a quarterback that amount of money, or you're paying a quarterback on a rookie contract. That's where you need to be, in one of those two categories. And so, in my opinion, that middle ground is exactly where you don't want to be, unless you have a Hall of Fame head coach and an absolutely loaded roster around him. And to me, in order to do that, you have to be below 40. In order to have an absolutely loaded roster, and I don't mean a decent roster. Like the 49ers can pay Brock Purdy $40 to $45 million a year, and they will have a decent roster. Okay, Brock Purdy at $1 million a year couldn't win the Super Bowl with an absolutely loaded roster around him. So I don't know what's going to give me a lot of hope and faith that Brock Purdy at 40 to 45 million with an okay roster around him is going to be able to get it done without a lot of things breaking their way. I mean, I'm not saying it can't happen, because look at Jalen Hurts just did it. Okay. And I know that's what a lot of people say. Well, the Eagles paid Hurts $50 million, so why can't the Niners do it? Okay, well, there's a lot of things there. Okay, let's break that stuff down. Here's the reason why. The number one reason why is, as much as I think John Lynch is a great guy and I respect the character of the man, he is not Howie Roseman. He's not even on his level. John Lynch is Brock Purdy and Howie Roseman is Patrick Mahomes. That's the gap. Okay. That's huge. That is absolutely huge. Because in order for the Niners to pull off what the Eagles pulled off, they would have to have just hit out of the ballpark drafts for the next 2 or 3 years. It's not happening this year. It's not there. It would take such an amazing amount of luck for the Niners to win the Super Bowl this year that it's almost incomprehensible the amount of luck that would have to happen for the Niners to actually succeed and win the Super Bowl this year. So number one, that's the thing. The Niners would have to have Howie Roseman. And again, as much as I love John Lynch, the man, he is not the general manager that Howie Roseman is. So that team has a lot of high-priced players on it. They're very top-heavy in that regard, but they're deep because they hit on draft after draft after draft after draft. And they rotate out old, aging, borderline star players and just replace them with young star players from the draft. That's how they were able to maintain that. That's how they're able to win with a guy at quarterback who is not actually making elite money. That is rare. There's a reason why, excuse me, my voice cracked. There's a reason why that's never done. There's a reason why the Eagles are the first team to actually accomplish that. And here's the other thing with that. At this point, right now, Jalen Hurts is actually not making $50 million a year. So there's going to come a point when the Eagles are going to have to make a decision. They are. When they're either going to have to really be sold on the fact that Jalen Hurts is that guy, and they're going to have to keep extending his contract out and reworking his contract and kicking that can down the road. They're going to have to keep doing that so that they can keep that cap number low, so that they can keep the team around him. Or they're going to have to take a massive cap hit and cut him and start over. But eventually, either way that they go, there's going to come a day where they're going to pay the bill. Like, there's only so many salary cap gymnastics you can do. Eventually, you got to pay the bill. And so that's the thing. How long can, because here's the thing. Eventually, you're going to have guys like Saquon Barkley who's going to age out of his prime. And you're going to have a guy like A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith that are going to hit the wrong side of 30, and they're going to age out of their primes. At that point, is Jalen Hurts enough to carry the team? Because I'm telling you right now, finding another Saquon Barkley isn't that easy. Look at the Eagles prior to him. So it's not like you can just go into the draft and be like, as much as I respect Howie Roseman, it's not like he's just going to go into the draft and find the next Saquon Barkley like they grow on trees. And I get it. Running backs are generally a position that are not hard to find, but we're not talking about just a running back here. We're talking about the top 1 or 2 best backs in the league. generational talent. So that's huge. That played a bigger role into the Eagles winning the Super Bowl. I won't say winning. It played a bigger role in the Eagles getting to the Super Bowl, in my opinion, than Jalen Hurts did. I really, truly believe that. Now, when the one thing I will give Hurts too, and here's the other difference, okay, between Brock Purdy and Jalen Hurts, is both times Hurts has been in the Super Bowl, he is balled out. He has come up clutch and he has outplayed Mahomes. He has looked like a superstar quarterback in those games. When the lights were at their brightest, he showed up and he showed out. That's not to say that Brock played bad in his Super Bowl, but he didn't play like that. So, at some point, all this young, or it was young, at some point, all this in their prime talent that the Eagles have right now is going to have to be replaced. And if there's any general manager that has shown that he can do it, it is Howie Roseman. But the odds that he's just going to keep hitting on draft pick after draft pick after draft pick after draft pick is pretty low. So here's my thing. If you're going to pay Brock Purdy $50 to $55 to $60 million, you have about a 2 or 3 year window. Because you got to think about this team, in 3 years, you got to think about how old Fred Warner is going to be, how old Nick Bosa is going to be. You got to think about, is George Kittle going to be around? Is Trent Williams going to be around? What's Brandon Ayuk? So at that point, you're going to have a super, super young team, more than likely. Which means that you would have had to have hit on this draft. The last draft, last year's draft, is going to have to be better than we already think it is. You're going to have to hit on this draft, and you're going to have to hit on the next 2 drafts in order for you to be able to say, well, we did what the Eagles did. There's a reason why that's an outlier. There's a reason why that hasn't been done before. And I don't see it being done again. So your best opportunities to win a Super Bowl are either to have Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen or Joe Burrow, one of those guys, or to have a guy like Brock Purdy on his rookie deal. That's why I don't agree with paying a quarterback $35, $40, $45 million. Because a quarterback making $35 to $45 million means that your team can't be as loaded as it would be if you had a quarterback making a rookie wage. To me, it's that simple. And I go back and forth on a few things because, I look at Brock, and like I said, a great kid, man, great guy, and a very, very good quarterback. But how many other quarterbacks honestly could do what Brock does on the Niners? And I think there's a lot more than people give credit for. And I know everybody wants to point to, I think prior to Brock getting here, all quarterbacks starting under Kyle Shanahan that wasn't Jimmy Garoppolo was 9-29, is I believe what the record was. It's something like that. But here's the thing. We're talking about CJ Beathard and Mullins. We're talking about Brian Hoyer, guys like that. I mean, come on. I'm not going to throw Trey Lance in there because he wasn't given a real shot, and I'm not going to disparage him by putting him in that category. Trey Lance is in a category all by himself, and that category is I got screwed. That's the category Trey Lance is in. But I look at somebody like Jimmy Garoppolo, and to me, Jimmy Garoppolo is in a category above Nick Mullins and Brian Hoyer and CJ Beathard. Those guys, in my opinion, are not backup quarterbacks. Those guys are third string quarterbacks. Jimmy Garoppolo is a backup quarterback, a high level backup quarterback in the right system. So I find it hard to believe that if you were to bring somebody like Mac Jones onto this team, that I find it very, very hard to believe that Mac Jones is not better than Jimmy Garoppolo. Because the reality of the situation is, if you're able to load up the team, you only need a Jimmy Garoppolo, maybe slightly better, just very, very slightly better than Jimmy Garoppolo quarterback. And I'm sorry, but I think that Mac Jones is a lot better than Jimmy Garoppolo. He's not as good as Brock Purdy, but he doesn't need to be. He really doesn't need to be. And honestly, man, I go back to 2019 and I think about that Super Bowl, and I don't think that Jimmy lost that Super Bowl. I think we could have won that Super Bowl with Jimmy. Kyle lost that Super Bowl. We lost that Super Bowl because of Kyle Shanahan, not because of Jimmy Garoppolo. Now, Garoppolo also didn't win it, but neither did Brock. So my thing is if you can get to and should have won a Super Bowl with Jimmy Garoppolo, are you telling me that you can't find 10, 12 other quarterbacks between who's in the league already and who's in college in the draft that can give you that level of play with the loaded team around them? And here's the thing. If you keep trying that route, eventually you're going to hit that guy. At some point, you're going to hit that guy that is Lamar Jackson, that is Patrick Mahomes, that is Josh Allen, that is Joe Burrow, where you are going to pay them 55, 60, or whatever the rate is at that particular moment. But to stay in that middle ground, see, you're about to put yourself in a situation that sucks when you pay a quarterback $40 to $45 million a year, between 40 and 50, which is, you got your fans that say Brock should be between 50 and 60. And then for the most part, the rest of the fans believe he should be between 40 and 50. And then you got the few of us that believe he should be under 40. And that's where I'm at. Because you get yourself in a really crappy place when you're paying your quarterback between 40 and 50 and your team is just good enough to be good. And what I mean by that is you're just good enough to sneak into the playoffs, maybe win a wild card, maybe even get lucky in the divisional round and make it to the NFC Championship game, but not win it. Because inevitably in those big games, in the conference championship games and in the Super Bowl, there comes a point when you need your quarterback to throw that shit on his back. You need him to strap him up and go win you the game. In every single playoff run, you're going to have a game where your quarterback's got to do it. And if his team is a little less talented than it would be if he was making $15 million a year, then you don't necessarily have all the tools in your tool bag anymore. And the way I look at it is, if you go back and you look at this past season, that's kind of what it's going to look like with Brock going forward. If he's making 40 to 60 million, 40 to 50 million, because now it was because of injuries, but I think you can kind of get a glimpse of what it's going to look like when that's the case. And so I would say that because of that, and because of inevitably, you're going to have that game where your quarterback has to go out and your quarterback has to put the team on his shoulders and he has to win you, even if it's just one game. But he's got to be able to do it. And I don't see Brock as that guy. I don't see him as having that ability to do that. And so you put yourself in this horrible position as a franchise where for the duration of that contract, you're never good enough to win it all, and you're never bad enough to get generational talent to build it back up. You're always stuck in the middle. You're always stuck drafting in the late teens, in the mid 20s, to where your picks are just okay. You get okay guys. You get Ricky Pearsalls. And that's nothing against the kid. He might show me that he's a great wide receiver, whatever, but you're gonna get guys like that. You're not going to have the ability to draft the guys higher, the Jamar Chases. You're not going to have the ability, and you got to also have a general manager that's smart enough to not pass on drafting a guy like Justin Jefferson. You have to have a GM that's smart enough not to draft Mike McGlinchey or Solomon Thomas or Javon Kinlaw or Reuben Foster. Drake Jackson. I mean, the list goes on and on and on and on and on. So you can't have all these things pulling you back. You at some point you got to do something that pushes you in one direction or the other. You got to have a quarterback that pushes you into the upper echelon of the NFL and makes you elite, or you got to have a team that's bad enough that pushes you into the beginning of the draft to where you can get that elite talent. And I would say picking up there in the top 3 or 4 or 5 picks makes it almost foolproof. But then I go back and I think about the fact that the 49ers did draft Solomon Thomas. So, they're not the Eagles. They're not Howie Roseman. So in my opinion, what I would do if I was the 49ers, honestly, I don't believe that this team is going to contend this year. I truly believe that more than likely this team is going to struggle to make the playoffs this year. Now, I'm optimistic. I have hope. I hope that they make the playoffs. I'm a fan first. But I believe that the odds are greater that they don't. And so I believe that what should be done is that whether they keep Brock or trade Brock, whichever, they certainly should not pay Brock anything over 40 million, in my opinion. And they need to draft a quarterback, and they need to draft another one next year and the year after that. And they need to keep trying to find that guy. And until they do, then they need to have a quarterback on a cheap contract so that they can build the team up around him, so that the quarterback doesn't have to be the guy. He can just be a guy. Because that's where we're at right now. Brock is great. Brock is phenomenal when he's a guy. He is not the guy. And that's the problem with paying him. Because right now, he's about to be paid like he's the guy. And I'll be the first one to come on here and eat crow if I'm wrong. And if the 49ers pay him, I really hope he does prove me wrong. Even if they don't pay him, even if they make him play out the last year of his contract, I hope he comes out next season and makes me stick my foot in my mouth and makes me come on here, the end of the season or whenever and be like, yo, I was so wrong on Brock Purdy. That guy is him. I just don't see it happening. So I believe that, coming up on the draft, we really need to look, and I'm not necessarily saying to draft one high. I'm not a fan of Cam Ward. I'm not really a Shedeur Sanders guy, honestly. I like Jackson Dart. I like Kyle McCord. I like Brady Cook. The quarterback I'm probably the most intrigued by in this draft is Jalen Milroe. He would never succeed on the Niners. Not Kyle's kind of guy at all. But I think the upside, the ceiling on that kid is super high. And I would be very intrigued to see how he would do under the right coach, under Jim Harbaugh. But I think there's plenty of guys later in the draft. You know, Riley Leonard, Brady Cook, Kyle McCord. Take a flyer on one of these guys. What do you have to lose? And I believe, I'm not one of these guys that's super down on Tanner Mordecai, but I believe that all three of those guys are better than Tanner Mordecai. And so, you know, take a flyer on them. Put 2 quarterbacks on the practice squad. And, you know, see what you got. But at the end of the day, what's going to happen is they're going to pay Brock. They're probably going to pay him between 50 and 55. And I hope I'm wrong. I really do. I hope that everything that I just laid out and spelled out is wrong. And I hope John Lynch does a great job of channeling his inner Howie Roseman and he's able to flip the switch and become the best GM in the league and everything will be great. But we'll see how it goes. Anyways, guys, it's so good to be back. I'm glad to be putting out content again. I'm so excited for the draft. I plan to do some more stuff leading up to the draft and during the draft and all that. So be on the lookout, guys. And I thank you all again for hanging with me, and we'll see you next time.